And my mom would be like, the Duke of Hazzard's on the phone. I'm like, the Duke? Like, is the Duchess there too? In the player's run that everybody refers to, and it's in the mischief videos, there's a guy driving a General Lee, and that happens to be me. I had no business being in the player's run that year. The General Lee at that point had decals on it for about 3 hours. The paintwork on it was about 6 days old. And we're driving it from Indianapolis to the USS Enterprise in New York City for the start of the player's run. It was originally supposed to be piloted by John Schneider, which is Bo Duke from the Dukes of Hazzard, but he had an engagement at the last minute and called me and said, Travis, will you drive the General Lee across the country for me? And this is a free trip on a road rally across the country, and if you don't say yes, you have a problem. We drove the General Lee from Indianapolis to the starting line at the USS Enterprise. It lost its brakes on the way there in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, because the car hadn't been on the road since the early 90s. And we restored it and somehow got it there and changed the brakes and adjusted them in the starting line basically overnight with all the cars there in front of the USS Enterprise. The next morning was time to drive an extremely untested, carbureted, big block, numbers matching 1969 Dodge Charger, no air conditioning, no cruise control, vinyl seats, from New York to LA with a bunch of maniacs, including Dustin and Dado and Father Barry and all these people you see on these mischief videos, and me in a General Lee. We were driving on a champagne diet with a beer budget, and we definitely shouldn't have been involved, but the people involved were amazing. We were the comic relief for the whole event because they were very serious. They had very nice vehicles, and we showed up in the General Lee. I mean, you had Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Porsches and everything else, and then Dado's just crazy roll-caged out BMW and the General Lee. So we left with minimal brakes and took off toward Niagara Falls. And they had arranged a helicopter tour over Niagara Falls. And this is pre-passport across the border kind of stuff. We pull up in a line with all these cars that are breaking every law known to man to get to this winery in Canada. And, you know, do you have anything to declare, basically, as you cross the border? And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to get here. And then our stop tonight's in Cleveland, and I have been zero sleep. I got to go. And everybody else is crossing the border, and they have the General Lee held up. And I'm like, why on God's green earth? And they said, sir, you have a weapon. I said, I'm cool, you know. If you remember the TV show, The Dukes of Hazzard, Bo and Luke had a bow and arrow with dynamite on the end of it. So did my General Lee in the back window, which I conveniently forgot about. That there's a bow and arrow with dynamite. I'm trying to get across a border crossing. So they wouldn't let the bow and arrow into Canada. I had to get to this place, so I had turned around, threw the bow and arrow into the weeds next to the border crossing, turned back around. I said, bow and arrow's gone. Check, gone. They let us go. So we went and had dinner at this first day and did the helicopter stuff, went back across the border. My friend Kenny at the time jumped out of the General Lee. And there it was, bow and arrow, still sitting there on the side of the road. So we get to Cleveland, and all is wellish. The car is still doing as good as it could be. I mean, some cars have a great soul. Some vehicles won't get out of the driveway. This car wanted to go. So we did Cleveland to Chicago, and that's across the Indiana Toll Road up there, and lots of drama. At a rest stop where there's a yellow Gallardo doing a burnout, and all the ABS turns on and it stalls out, and police show up, and I went out the end and was gone. And I mean, I'm driving the most recognizable vehicle in the history of the world with a Rudy Toot horn and just, hey, nothing to see here. So we make it to Chicago, and all this police escorts in and out, and the next stop. And then we had to be in Aspen. Kenny and I decided to leave. I think it was, they went to Topeka, Kansas Raceway. And we're like, man, this thing is not running the best. It's a carbureted car and all these other crazy, I'm on four-wheel drum brakes, like bad move. So we take off, and Kenny and I pull into Aspen, and this thing's running horribly because of the elevation change. And we have a horrible noise in the rear, rah, 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 just bad in the rear end. And I'm like going, man, we have made it this far. What on God's green earth? And all the locals are like, oh, you got to tune this and this, that, and other. You're carbureted and blah, blah, this. In the morning, you'll be fine. And I'm like, man, I was like, but where do you get parts for a 69 Dodge Charger in Aspen, Colorado? I knew we had a wheel bearing failing in the rear end, but basically all Chrysler rear ends were pretty much the same. You have 9 1/4, 8 1/4. It's really just slightly different. But there was a snowplow truck in the parking lot of the lodge or wherever our accommodations were for the evening, and it happened to be a Dodge Ram Charger snowplow truck, and when we left it had no wheel bearings in it because they were in my General Lee. So we were a little late leaving Colorado or leaving Aspen. We were the first team to arrive, but we had found out that Dado got arrested. And we really didn't know very many of these people, but they adopted us as these crazy idiots that are driving this non-air conditioned 69 Dodge Charger, loud car, no cruise control, vinyl seats. The driving position in a Charger is terrible. I mean, it's such a big car, but you're so close to the windshield. My friend Kenny had just graduated college, and this was, I would hate to say, my gift to him to take him with me on this thing, because it was a gift to me to be there anyhow. He was just crazy enough to go along with me. And he was a graphic designer, still is, unbelievable artist. And this is pre-Wi-Fi stuff and pre-send it to my phone stuff. And Father Barry said, hey, can Kenny put together a graphic or something and we'll put it on a t-shirt in Vegas? I mean, you have to think, we have the least technical vehicle in the whole mess. A 69 Dodge Charger, carbureted, big block, vinyl seats, windows down, no cruise control, and he's on a laptop that's probably got about 2 gig of memory on its greatest day on earth, designing this shirt. And we probably had to pay to plug into that truck stop in Utah, and it sent it to the Kinko's that doesn't even exist anymore. And then all of a sudden, these bad boys showed up. I mean, I still have the free Dado Players Run shirt that used to fit me back in the day, but they go for like hundreds of dollars on eBay. And the true story, this was designed by Kenny Livingston in a 69 Dodge Charger at 80 plus miles an hour with the windows down, uploaded at a truck stop in Utah, sent to a Kinko's, pressed on a t-shirt press, and arrived at a party at the Mandalay Bay. And somehow Dado did get freed, and he was signing these like autographed, but I don't know. This is the craziest thing in the history of road rallies. So in the world of YouTube and the instant gratification that is a weekly video, and you get to meet these people and they welcome you into their lives and whatever else, Dustin and Dado had to release and edit a DVD, and you would have to buy it, the Mischief DVDs, at Best Buy. I bought the one that I'm in, that they misspelled my website on, at a Best Buy. The impact that they had on the car community in the early 2000s through the middle, and the things that they were doing, they were so far ahead of their time that the kids nowadays don't understand what it takes to put all this content out. But they had to do it, edit it, do a case for it, UPC it, shrink wrap it, get it into stores. And that's serious. There are so many things that wouldn't have happened in the car culture and the Mischief and all this stuff like that, that you know, you can look back and watch the videos and they are genuinely having a good time. But at the same time, the cameras that they're shooting on are this big, and they have tapes in them, and they're digital 8, and they have to, it's not, you know, upload it, it's upload it via, feed it into the computer at the same rate that you taped it at. So Dustin and Dado, especially Dustin, he was as cool as a cucumber with me, and he couldn't have picked me out of 2 people. I was just the idiot in the General Lee that's doing burnouts in it and whatever else. But Brought a graphic designer with along, and shirts are bringing $200 on eBay. That happened, and Dado got out of jail somehow, and Dustin went back and got him in a rental car. So there was a lot of mileage going the wrong direction that way. And our last stop was the Renaissance Hotel at the corner of Hollywood and Highland. And we pulled into the General Lee, and this thing had made it. This car had such a soul, and I'm like, that's where there are people, and I believe all vehicles have souls, and I have no idea why, but some of them are just mad at the world, and some of them just won't stop. And this car that had been at a trailer park, and I'd restored it for years, and was a total mess, just drove from Indiana to New York City and across the country, and was the third car to arrive. I've always called the General Lee a guy. It's, some cars are, she's a good one, no, he's always been a guy, and we're spraying it off and washing it off and all this stuff. And there was a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes, because though it looked like it was organized very well on the outside, there was trouble a-brewing, because John Schneider was supposed to drive the General Lee, but Travis Bell shows up in the General Lee. They had advertised that the General Lee was going to be there, maybe not this pilot behind the wheel. So that didn't let down any of the competitors, because we all became family on the run. But the organizer of it was not the happiest person in the world. So at that point, I expressed to him that I know Mr. Schneider personally. There is a saying that says, never meet your heroes. If you're a fan of the Lamborghini Countach, don't drive one. And if you love the General Lee, don't drive one. But John Schneider has no reason to be cool. He's just cool, man. And he always has been he would call my mother and like, I need to borrow Travis's General Lee. And my mom would be like, the Duke of Hazzard's on the phone. I'm like, the Duke? Like, is the Duchess there too? Like, my mom has no idea, but she just calls him the blonde guy. So I called the blonde guy and I said, hey, do you want to come to the awards banquet for the Players Run? And he's like, I appreciate you doing this. I'll be more than happy to come on down XYZ. And John Schneider showed up at this Renaissance Hotel awards banquet, took pictures all night long. Just, I cannot stand up and get out of frame high enough to where I appreciate this. He's just the nicest guy in the world. So comes back around to, there was a payment involved for the General Lee to make its appearance across the country that I really wasn't aware of, but I had no idea how I was going to get this car back to Indiana at all. And I was not connected enough with anyone who can get this car from Los Angeles back to Indianapolis. So everyone had cleared out. Everybody's going to go on a boat trip the next morning, and I have to figure out how I'm going to get my car back. So John said, did the guy pay you? And I go, no one's paid me. He said, you mean the guy didn't write you a check for bringing I said, no. I said, this is all overdrawn credit cards and just, He said, hang on a second. So John has a son, and he said, watch him for a second. And we were at the back of this banquet room. They were kind of cleaning up, the organizers, the fella and his wife. And you could tell there's tension in the room and a little turmoil. And I have Mr. Schneider's son, and we're like, we should we'll wait on your dad out here. And I heard and turned around and saw, this is why Mr. Schneider is the realest person I've ever dealt with, snapped his laptop out of his hand. He was ignoring Mr. Schneider. I'm not going to pay for, you didn't drive the car, the other guy drove the car, blah, blah, blah. And he snaps the laptop out of his hand. He says, now that I have your attention. And I was like, ooh, boy, like it's going down. Like Bo Duke is starting a bar fight. Like what is going on? Outside, here comes Mr. Schneider with a check. And he said, well, it was $3,000, but here's $3,500. And I'm like, shoot. And he said, you'll get it home, right? And I said, yeah, and I'll get myself home and Kenny home, and we're gone. So I left the General Lee at Rich Septon's house, which was one of the mechanics at the Dukes of Hazzard. He still lived in Santa Monica. And a truck came and picked it up, and I flew home.